I do have some climate change news. We'll get to this first. This is from my favorite website, rightwingwatch.org, and very interesting take on climate change from former Congresswoman Michele Bachmann. You might remember her as the bass player from Bachman Turner Overdrive. I do that joke every time, and I really shouldn't. It wasn't funny the first time. But Michele Bachmann, of course, married to Marcus Bachmann. And if you're not familiar with Marcus Bachmann, he runs one of those clinics where they pray away the gay. And as I always like to point out about Marcus Bachmann, if you are, what do they call it, gay conversion therapy or reparative therapy? If you've ever seen or heard an interview with Marcus Bachmann, it's pretty obvious that he has made this his life's work, because he himself is running away from something, if you know what I mean. But that's just conjecture on my part. I'm not suggesting anything, but they have adopted a lot of foster children, the Bachmanns, and yet they don't have any children of their own. But anyway, but hey, God bless them for adopting all those kids. But Michele Bachmann has a very interesting take on climate change. Conservative folks tend to be very skeptical of climate change. Trump at one point, of course, said it's a hoax perpetuated by the Chinese. And of course, most conservatives I know seem to think it's some sort of conspiracy between liberals and the scientists of the world to try to destroy capitalism. Seems legit, right? Sure. I mean, why not, right? But Michele Bachmann recently offered her take on climate change, and this is pretty interesting. She claims that climate change is a fraud because God says we will never be flooded. So that's exciting. So I guess from that we can glean that God himself has reassured Michele Bachmann. Or is it because in the Bible? Because I think in the Bible, the part where it talks about Noah's Ark and the flood that killed everybody, because Old Testament God had a bit of a temper. New Testament God seems pretty chill. But Old Testament God would send, if he was really mad, he might send a flood or maybe a plague or some locusts. But I think he says in the Bible, if I remember, because I went to a Catholic school from grade 2 to grade 8, I think he flooded the world to kill everybody. Except those on the ark, of course. And then he said, he would never do it again. So I guess it was like, it was like a one-time deal. Like, I'm just going to flood the place, just this once. But, after that, y'all got to figure it out, because, I'm just going to be out of water or something. I don't know. So this is, interesting. Brian Mackey says, not flooded, baked, LOL. Well, that's true, because as the earth continues to warm up, we clearly are, we are baking, or we are being fried. We are, unless, Brian means baked as in, cannabis continues to be legalized. Made a little joke there. Oh, we're having some fun here today. But anyway, so this is what Michele Bachmann is saying. So this this somehow proves that climate change is fake. But let's, as is tradition in these instances, I will share with you the actual audio of Michele Bachmann saying this. Because let's be honest, my friends, it's very easy for me to sit here and perhaps unfairly just ridicule the crazy things that some of these folks say, which may not be crazy. Maybe I just need to open my mind. Maybe I need to free my mind and the rest will follow. I don't know. But I'm going to play the audio for you and you can hear it with me. We'll hear Michele Bachmann explaining this in her own words. And as always, as is the unofficial policy of the show, unofficial as in non-binding, you don't have to do this. But I ask of you this one favor. Let's listen, not only with open minds, but with open hearts as well, because we're all about love here on Matt Connarton Unleashed. And any ridiculing that I do of someone like Congresswoman Bachmann, it's all done with love. It really is. Never malice. It's all with love. All right, here we go. Let's Let's listen to her
You're
explain.
talking to someone who's been at the UN for 3 years.
Yes.
And I've met with about 95 of the 193 ambassadors at the UN.
And this is what they believe.
Every single one of them
I forgot that she actually had that position. She's like, what is she, the faith ambassador to the UN or something? Like she goes to the UN and tells everybody why they should be Christians or something? Brian says, yeah, that's it. Free your mind. Get baked. Oh, my goodness. Oh, I notice, Brian, you spell baked with a capital B. Is that in reference to, we have a food establishment here, called Baked, right here on Elm Street, if I'm not mistaken. All right, let's see.
talk about climate change. It is their number one, quote, priority. And in fact, I had one ambassador who was practically crying when I was in there because I asked all of them, how can I pray for you? Her prayer was, I want you to pray for climate change and pray for my country because we're going to be underwater. Well, I want to refer people to the book of Genesis.
Wait, I'm sorry. I'm laughing because it's suddenly very obvious where this is going, and I love it. I'm going to back it up a little bit because this is too good. Let's just reflect on the context for a moment. So she's at the United Nations, an organization full of people who represent their countries, some of which, yes, there are places in the world, for those of you who are not aware of this, there are places in the world that are not only feeling some of the effect of climate change, in which case, you know, they may be experiencing extreme weather, they may be experiencing drought, they may not have enough water falling to grow food. You know, these are terrible things. But there's also places in the world, yes, that are literally going to eventually be underwater. And someone at the United Nations who represents one of these countries, presumably most of which, you know, most of the leadership of these countries probably to some degree or another actually do believe in science, unlike the leadership, quote unquote, of the United States currently. And they believe that this is a real issue, partly because, you know, I mean, I guess here in the United States, oh, I hear the sirens. Happens once a show. I guess here in the United States, we can afford to be a little bit cocky about it because, you know, we have a big chunk of an entire continent here in North America. So it'll be a little time yet until the United States is underwater. But there are other places in the world where, yes, they are literally going to be underwater eventually. Jenny is here. Hello.
Hi.
So I'm going to, because you just got here, I'm going to...
I actually was listening on the way in, so I actually heard her speech at the UN, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm actually going to start it from the beginning anyway, just because it's just so much fun. It's such a joy to listen to Michele Bachmann. So I'm going to just roll this back to the beginning, and we can hear her talking about...
She's praying away the global warming.
She's going to pray away... Well, no, you can't pray away something that doesn't exist. She doesn't believe it exists, but she is going to. Well, I want to start this back, but we'll hear her explain to the. I don't think she identifies the country for whom the representative of which she was speaking to, but here we'll go back to the beginning of this.
You're talking to someone who's been at the UN for 3 years.
Yes.
And I've met with about 95 of the 193 ambassadors at the UN.
Wow.
And this is what they believe.
Every single one of them talk about climate change. It is their number one, quote, priority. And in fact, I had one ambassador who was practically crying when I was in there because I asked all of them, how can I pray for you? Her prayer was, I want you to pray for climate change and pray for my country because we're going to be underwater. Well, I want to refer people to the book of Genesis. Read Genesis chapter 6 through Genesis chapter 9. There is nothing more clear, and I would encourage pastors to start preaching on this issue of climate change and God's view of climate change because the very covenant was established by God and Noah. And that covenant was that sin was so gross in the world that God had to bring about judgment, and then he had to bring about salvation. And from there came Abraham, and God put a rainbow in the sky as a sign of his covenant. And he said very clearly to the entire world, never again will there be judgment. Never again will the world be flooded. There will always be seed time. There will always be harvest. There will always be summer. There will always be winter. You can take it to the bank. That's God's word. And what is it that these frauds tell us with climate change? That the world's going to be flooded. Isn't it interesting? They aren't saying that it's going to be another catastrophe. They say that it's flooding. We're going to be flooded. God says we will never be flooded. And I want to challenge every pastor listening. Would you please give a sermon on climate change and God's view of climate change? This isn't being political. This is being biblical. And I am begging the pastors who are listening, be biblical on issue after issue after issue. Be biblical, because God's people are perishing because of lack of knowledge. And the greatest antidote to deception is knowledge. And so that's why we need the pulpits to prepare people with what the Bible says about truth.
The greatest antidote to deception is knowledge, she says, with precisely zero sense of irony or self-awareness. But anyway, by the way, so just so everyone is clear, this is why we're all doomed. I mean, I try to be an optimist by nature. I mean, I try to be an optimist generally. I am an optimist by nature, but I've never been particularly optimistic about this issue. I do believe we will ultimately destroy the planet and ourselves because there's still enough people like her in the world that they will destroy us, whether it's through not believing in science because of something they read in the Bible, or because they're determined to bring about Armageddon, because, you know, these are the type of people who, that's why I've always said, I think it would be legitimately dangerous for, say, someone like Mike Pence. This is, I think, the biggest danger of impeaching Trump is removing Trump, and then, not that I'm a Trump fan, obviously, if you know, I think listeners know that, but Pence is dangerous in his own way, because I'm worried that he's one of those dudes who, you know, if we get into a nuclear standoff with another country, he might think he hears God's voice in his head saying, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead and launch those missiles. It's time. It's time to bring about the second coming. You have been chosen for this moment, Mike Pence. You have been chosen for this moment to usher in, I don't know, the rapture or whatever crazy fairy tale thing that, you know, that these people believe in is supposed to happen. Seriously, like, that's what scared me about John McCain in 2008. Is that, you know, having Sarah Palin as a vice president, because Sarah Palin is exactly that kind of moron who I can imagine, and I'm not even trying.
Tell me how you really feel there, Maddie.
Well, it sounds funny when I say it, but I'm actually completely serious. Like, I legitimately worry about that.
The one I was afraid of was Huckabee.
Oh, yeah. Oh, same thing. Same problem.
And the irony in that was when remember when he was running, I kept talking about The Handmaid's Tale because I had to read that book in college.
Yeah.
And it scared the crap out of me. And then here we go. We get a TV show and it's like life imitating art or art imitating life. I don't know, but it's scary because some of the crap that's in there, you could hear from the rhetoric from people like Bachmann and Huckabee. I mean, that was their rhetoric.
Yeah. These people are far too confused to be in charge of weapons of any kind.
They're frightening.
Now, that is operating under the assumption, of course, that they actually believe in any of what they say. Many of them, I'm sure, don't. Like Mike Huckabee, for example. Does he really believe in any of this, or has this?
I think he does.
Or has this just been a pathway to power for him, like the televangelist?
No, I think he really buys this. I really do.
Perhaps.
I really, 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 really do.
The Honorable Heidi Hamer joins us in the Facebook live chat. Hello, Heidi. Now, I always say, like, with the televangelists, for example, like Jim Baker and Joel Osteen, these people, I always say, I'm absolutely convinced they're atheists. Because nope. I'll tell you why. Because if they really actually believed in God, they would be terrified of making religion into a multi-million-dollar business.
Nope, it's totally justified. It's totally justified. It's totally justified. I disagree with you. I lived in the Bible Belt. I did 3 years time limit.
No, but I'm not.
As far as I'm concerned. And these people buy into it lock, stock, and barrel. You should see the mega churches
I know.
that line. Wait. You should see the mega churches in Georgia. There's literally one mega church next to another mega church, and they are monstrosities. And this is God's house, God's money. You put as much money into God's house as you want to. You put that pastor up because you're supposed to.
Right.
That's how they see it.
But I'm not talking about the morons who fall for it. They're the rubes. No, I'm talking about the actual televangelists.
You think every one of them is really? Come on.
No. You think Jim?
I disagree.
There's no way. There's no way Jim Bakker actually believes in God. If he actually believed in God while he's selling these phony food buckets and making all this money off of religion,
they justify it.
He would, right.
They're not selling it for a huge profit. They're helping their parishioners prepare for Armageddon because they know that most people won't get raptured.
That's the sales pitch. But
they believe. No, these people believe. Oh yes, I've been around these people. They believe it.
Right, but you haven't been around
barrel.
Right, but you haven't been around Jim Bakker. You haven't been around Joel Osteen.
No, I have no.
These people are charlatans.
No,
they know.
I think they totally buy it. So they have to buy it. It's how they sleep at night.
They sleep at night because they're rich, and they assume that when they die, they're not going to hell because there is no hell. Gia in the Facebook live chat says, "Sorry, Jenny, I have to agree with Matt on this. These are scammer antisocial freaks."
Okay, I respectfully disagree. I think they buy into the pitches that they're selling for the most part.
How could they?
I don't believe that they are atheists. I do believe that they believe in God.
So you think the typical con man actually deludes himself into believing in his own con?
These guys aren't the typical con men.
Well,
the typical con man isn't conning out millions and millions of dollars and mega houses and golf trips and boats because God said so. But they do it. There was one I was watching. Did you see the one? I don't know if this was actually something I saw on a show or where I saw it, but it was one of these televangelist type people in front of a camera, and he's supposed to be talking in tongues, but he's reading his phone.
Yeah.
While he's talking in tongues.
Yeah.
And he stops for a second, and he's scrolling on his phone, and then he starts talking in tongues again. That guy, he's a total charlatan. I don't think he's really getting it.
No, see, he might be real because that might have, see, you bringing that up.
Oh no.
Because I've wondered, and I've talked about this on the show, all these people who say God talks to them. I've always wondered, how does God talk to them? Do they hear?
It is the 21st century.
Do they hear an actual voice in their head? Does he appear to them in dreams? How does this work? Maybe he sends text messages to them, and that guy was reading his text messages.
No, that guy's the charlatan that's just there for the money because he's not doing the act very well. The other guys are experts.